Ben ilk tebliğcimize sözü takdim ediyorum. Yasien Mohamed, Türkçesiyle kader ve irade kavramı bağlamında Said Nursi'nin Kelam düşüncesi diyor. Kendileri tebliğlerini İngilizce sunacaklar.
Respected scholars, ladies and gentlemen, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. It's indeed an opportunity for me to present my paper at this very special conference. I thank the organizers for inviting me and for sharing some thoughts. It's really an opportunity to meet some interesting people here. And I have specifically chosen the topic of divine destiny and free will in the thought of Said Nursi, because I find that the concept of qada wa qadar and hurriya illustrates very well the Kalam orientation of Said Nursi as being a continuation of the Ash'ari Kalam. And secondly, I want to also bring out through this paper and through this concept of divine destiny another distinctive aspect in Said Nursi's thought, who was a late Ottoman figure. And that is that Kalam for him was not purely intellectual exercise only, but it was a source of faith, of Iman, and the practical implications of Iman and faith was important to him. How Kalam becomes a source of positive action and a source of solace and comfort in times of tragedy and suffering. In the second half of the 19th century and the beginning of the 20th century, Western intellectual trends such as materialism, positivism, Darwinism, and atheism spread in Turkey, and some Ottoman scholars wanted to revive Kalam, taking into consideration modern secular thought. Ottoman Kalam was a continuation of the classical Ash'ari Kalam as expounded by Al-Juwayni and Al-Ghazali. Although the Ottomans were generally from the Hanafi Maturidi school, most of the books studied in the madrasas were from the Ash'aris. Now, like Harpurti and Ibrahim Haki or Ismail Haki, some of the previous speakers have referred to them, Nursi also felt the need for reviving the Islamic disciplines, especially Kalam. Nursi felt that Kalam did not provide convincing arguments for the existence of God, and that the Risala, which is based on the Quran, provides a better method for attaining the knowledge of God. The Risala is not a work of conventional Kalam. Nursi does not even deal with the topic of the fluctuation of faith and action. Although he adopts the classical Kalam position, his main aim is to persuade the reader that belief is superior to unbelief. He considered the Risala as an alternative approach to Sufism, Tasawwuf, Islamic philosophy, Hikmah, and scholastic theology, Kalam. Nursi adopted the basic positions of Ash'ari Kalam, but found it too intellectual for the general public, and favored a Quran-based theology that is not purely intellectual, but expresses itself in allegorical forms. The theme of theodicy preoccupied Nursi's attention in his new Sa'id phase, which is after World War I. He was inspired by classical figures such as Imam Al-Ghazali, Abu Hassan al-Shadili, and Sheikh Ahmad Sarindi, and other Sufi thinkers. In this new phase, Nursi became less reliant on Western philosophical methods of understanding and drew inspiration and insight from the Quran itself. Now, divine destiny in relation to divine will and divine knowledge. Firstly, according to Nursi, divine destiny is connected to divine knowledge, as contained in the following Quranic verse. With him are the keys of the unseen, none but he knows them. He knows what is in the land and the sea, not a leaf falls, but he knows it. Not a grain amid the darkness of the earth, nor of wet or dry, but it is in a manifest book. Quran chapter 6 verse 59. Divine destiny is identical to divine knowledge pre-recorded on the preserved tablet. The destiny of a single seed has two aspects to it. One way of a seed displaying destiny is by divine knowledge, which is the manifest record, Lawh Mahfuz, and the other is by divine will, which is the manifest book, Kitab Mubin. The former is destiny theoretical as the seed, and the latter destiny actual as the tree. Thus, man cannot... Okay, now we turn to the aspect of free will. Nursi believes that one should acknowledge the reality of the human free will so that one can take responsibility for one's actions, especially one's sins. But if God destines all things, including human actions, then how is it that man will be made responsible for his actions on the Day of Judgment? Man is responsible because he has a free will which is attested by human experience. Intuitively, he knows he is free, and that is why he feels guilty should he do wrong. Moreover, the Quran supports the notion that man has a free will, and that is why he is held accountable on the Day of Judgment. Nursi believes that sin is due to man's own will, although God is the creator of all actions, good and evil. But God does not desire that man should commit evil. Humans who commit evil are guilty of an act which is ugly. Since God has created the action, it is not ugly, but what is ugly is the fact that man has desired to commit that evil action, and has done so on account of his own will. Thus, God is the author of the evil of human action, but not the evil of human desire. God is the creator of all acts, even the evil ones, but he is not responsible for the evil acts which man performs by his own volition. In other words, the power in the evil action comes from God, but the defect of the evil act comes not from him, but from the defective secondary cause. The implication is that man's actions are created by God, but performed by man on account of his particularized will, which makes him the agent of his actions. Man's will, which is relative and not existential, enables him to acquire the action. This view is in harmony with the Ash'arite view of kasb, acquisition. If God is the creator of all natural and human acts, including evil human acts, then why should the killer be called a murderer? Nursi replies by stating that God creates man's acts in that he gives external existence to them, but he does not perform those acts. In other words, God is the creator of the action of killing because he has given man the power to kill, but God is not responsible for a particular killing. The man who has killed is the murderer as he has committed the act of killing on his own free will. God therefore creates the act of murder, but man is the cause of it as he has acquired this power to act in this way. His free will is predetermined, but not his specific choice to kill which comes from himself. Man in this sense bears his own sins. God gives him the capacity to sin, and if he chooses to do so, his action will be sinful and ugly on account of his own choice and not because of his predetermined capacity. Therefore, one can call the killer a murderer because he is responsible for his own sins. Now we turn to the aspect of the evil in the world, and in this part is fresh approach inside Nursi. If existence is pure good, then why do we have evil in this world? How is it that God, who is all-powerful and all-merciful and all-compassionate, allows evil and suffering to exist? Nursi adopts a positive approach to the existence of evil in the world and states that without evil there will not be any good. Also, what might appear evil and harmful might in fact have more good in it. For him, if we have faith in divine destiny and trust in God, then we can see the big picture and not be depressed for small harms that affect us. And when we in fact would be benefiting from the overall good that arises from God's bounties and compassion. The basic attitude is one of optimism in the face of misfortune. Nursi's approach to evil is not purely theoretical. He himself suffered exile and so had to deal with these issues from a standpoint of his existential experience. Despite his belief in divine destiny, he said, and I quote, I started to utter fearful objections to divine destiny, unquote. For him, theodicy was not merely a scholarly question of philosophy or Kelam. It is a matter of faith and a matter of the heart. As he states, divine destiny and the power of choice are aspects of a belief pertaining to state and conscience, which show the final limits of Islam and belief. They are not theoretical and do not pertain to knowledge. It involves faith and emotion and should not be weighed on the scales of logic. A true understanding of this is a mystery of the divine unity. Divine destiny looks to the real cause, but man tends to look only at the apparent cause. Superficially, something may appear to be unjust to us, but from the view of divine destiny, it is just. There is the outer and inner face of things, mulk and malakut. And the outer face appears incompatible with God, but the inner face of things, which is the true reality, we can reconcile with God. Rain, for example, may cause some damage, but in relation to divine destiny, we can only see the overall good of the rain. The little evil in this world should not blind us to the greater good and infinite bounties of God. And this reminds me of a friend from Cape Town when he visited Istanbul in the year 2000. And he was given the collection of the Risala Nur, the work of the Rizwan Sayyid, and took it back to Cape Town. And you know, South Africa, we have not been exposed because of apartheid with the rest of the world. And we were more familiar with the tafsir of Maududi, Sayyid Qutb, and Yusuf Ali's translation. So this was something new for us in South Africa. So when he returned to Cape Town, he was placed in prison for several months. He told me the story just before we met at the wedding, and he was telling me the story just before I came to Istanbul. And he said, you know, he was reading the Risala Nur in prison. And it gave him comfort, because on the one hand he was placed unjustly in prison, but on the other hand he was saying, but Allah knows why I am in prison. There is the real cause is Allah, not human beings that place him in prison. And that particular idea sank into his mind and his heart, and it gave him comfort during the 7 years of the imprisonment. So it's just an illustration of the practical implication of the Kelam of Sayyid Nursi in human life. So thus, a believer is always hopeful in the face of suffering. The Quran urges us not to despair of God's mercy. Pessimistic and misguided people see this world as a kind of hell. But with faith we can see the light of existence. For Nursi, divine destiny is not a burden, but it's liberating. It provides comfort and security. With belief in divine destiny, man can throw his burdens on the ship of divine destiny and roam freely within its perfection. It removes the illusion of a free carnal soul. A man who acknowledges the king's authority enjoys all the privileges of the palace. But the one who does not and interferes with the affairs of the palace will suffer. Similarly, man's acceptance of God's authority and divine destiny will lead to his happiness even if he faces calamities. For in misfortune and pain there is divine wisdom. How does Nursi view divine wisdom in relation to death and illness? Death is natural, but it is by God's command, and a passing from a particular life of a seed to the universal life of a shoot. Death offers glad tidings and comfort for a person of faith. Sufis look at the end result of death, but Nursi looks at the present. By contemplating upon one's current frailty, one becomes aware of the fleeting nature of life and can be saved of heedlessness. He says, and I quote, "Since our way is not the Sufi path, but the way of reality, we are not compelled to perform this contemplation in an imaginary and hypothetical form like the Sufis. Our way is not to bring the future to the present in respect of reality, but to go in the mind to the future from the present in respect of reality and gain on." So we don't look at the end result, we look at our existential experience, where there's illness or suffering or whatever, and from there we turn to the divine reality. We can also take lessons from illnesses. It is not so depressing as it seems if we view it from the point of view of divine destiny. In dealing with severe illness, Nursi proposes two things: the contemplation of death, which makes one realize the transitory nature of this world, and fasting and ascetic practices to overcome the blindness of the evil commanding soul. These two things will not cure the it will not cure the illness, but it will provide spiritual therapy for the believer who will come to realize his frailty before God and will be spiritually healed. The physical ailment will then be viewed as minor compared to his realization of death as an imminent reality. For Nursi, illness is a blessing, as it may lead a person to think about his death and about the year after, whereas in youthful health, one may become worldly and heedless of the year after. Nursi states, through the calamity of good health, some of your fellows become neglectful, give up the 5 daily prayers, do not think of the grave and forget God Almighty. Because that's a calamity of good health. And he quotes here, through the superficial pleasure of a brief hours of worldly life, they shake and damage an unending eternal life and even destroy it. Due to illness, you see the grave, which you will in any event enter, and the dwellings of the year after beyond it, and you act in accordance to that. That means for you, illness is good health, while for some of your peers, this good health is sickness. I unquote. By good health, Nursi does not mean physical health, but spiritual health. Illness can enhance our spirituality, as it would impel us to pray more and think of death and the afterlife. Thus, sickness is a human reality that should lead the believer to God. Human frailty is an argument against a sense of complacent self-satisfaction. The sick person must confront a harsh but liberating reality. Although illness is not part of divine destiny, one should not have a fatalistic attitude, but should take the prescription from the physician. Medical cure is not always possible, but with faith in a compassionate God, one can overcome natural anxieties and attain peace of mind. The patient who accepts God's decree will see the spiritual fruits. Conclusion. Though Nursi's theology accords with the Sunni Asharite perspective, in that he accepts God as the creator of all good and evil. Evil human actions, although created, are ugly as they come from man's volition. For Nursi, Kelam is not an end in itself, but a means of expounding on Islamic belief. Although Nursi takes up the same positions as the classical Ash'arites, and although he presents some of the same arguments, he does not follow their style of exposition entirely. Although the belief in divine destiny is mysterious, he does not shy away from discussing it, but he also does not extend the logical arguments too far, as his main preoccupation is in the practical implication of belief and how it can serve as a form of solace and spiritual therapy for the believer. Nursi derived inspiration from Sunni theology, not merely for a rational defense of Islam, but also to bring about moral reform. He did not provide a new theology, but revived the old one, making it relevant to the challenges of secular modernity. His style is less technical than classical theology. It is both philosophical and anecdotal, and so appeals both to the intellectual and to the ordinary Muslim reader. Consequently, Sayyid Nursi has left the legacy of a movement which has widespread support not only in Turkey but also in other parts of the world. The struggle between good and evil is an existential fact of life. We are dominated and challenged by the evil soul. Calamities, tragedies, and even some human evils may appear unjust, but in fact these have a purpose, a test to test man in this world, to see if he will turn to despair or to trust in God. We experience suffering, injustice, and evil in the world, and we try to make sense of it. The Odyssey helps us with that, so that we do not blame God for our suffering. Thus, the evil, instead of being harmful, becomes beneficial. Through the teachings of the Quran and the Risala Nur, we learn to find comfort and solace in our suffering. This is a distinctive aspect of Nursi's Kelam. Teşekkür ederim.
Biz de Yasien Mohamed Bey'e teşekkür ediyoruz. Gerçekten kapsamlı bir tebliğ süresi içerisinde güzel bir şekilde sundu. Sayyid Nursi'nin risalelerinde Cenab-ı Hakk'ın ilahi kaderini takdiri, bu hür iradesi ile irtibatlı olarak şer problemi, hastalık ve ölüm gibi dünyada iyilik, kötülük dengesi açısından risalelerden hareketle açıklamaya çalıştı. Kapsamlı bir tebliğ, çok boyutlu bir tebliğ. Eminim yazılı metin okunduğunda müellifin mesajı daha etraflı bir şekilde anlaşılacaktır diye düşünüyorum. Kendisine teşekkür ediyoruz.